My discovery of the Christian faith basically came through my astronomy. I got very interested in astronomy when I was 7 years old. I wanted to know why the stars were hot. My parents told me to go to the library. I came back with 5 books on physics and astronomy. They thought, well, did you have to read all those? So, no, I found a lot of other interesting things too. But from the age of 7 onwards, I would basically focus on a subdiscipline of astronomy every year. And was at age 16, I focused on cosmology. That's the science of the origin and history of the universe. And that's when I realized that of all the different models to explain the origin of the universe, the Big Bang model was fitting the observations. And I knew if it was Big Bang, the universe had to have a beginner. So it was at age 17, I began to search for the cosmic beginner.
Wow.
And I didn't really know where to look, but I thought a good place to look would be the writings of the great philosophers. Emmanuel Kant is considered the father of modern cosmology. So I read his critique of pure reason and realized he doesn't really have the correct concepts of space and time. And so then I looked at Rene Descartes, and then I realized, I got to look elsewhere. So I began to go through the world's holy books, began with Hinduism and the Hindu Vedas, and realized they spoke about a reincarnating universe. They had the wrong age for the universe. They actually give a very explicit date, 4.32 billion years, and I knew that was incorrect. Their measure for the entropy of the universe was off by 100 million times. And so then I looked at the Buddhist commentaries, discovered that they were basically saying the same thing about cosmology as the Hindus. I looked at the Quran, I looked at the Baha'i writings, and after about a year, I finally picked up a Bible. And I did get to see 2 Christians from 30 feet away when I was 11 years old. And these were 2 businessmen that came into our public school and put 2 boxes on our teacher's desk. They didn't say a single word, but in those boxes were Gideon Bibles. So I
Wow.
took a Gideon Bible home. It stayed untouched on my bookshelf for 6 years. But at age 17, I pulled that Gideon Bible off the shelf and began to go through it, and immediately realized this book was unlike any other holy book. It was very specific about geography, history, and science. It was the only holy book I picked up that invited objective testing and actually showed me step by step how to put everything to the test. I mean, I was taught the scientific method when I was in grade 1. We got it in grade 2. We got it all 12 years. That's kind of the way the Canadian education system was at that time. So when I picked up the Bible, I immediately recognized the scientific method in the creation text.
Wow.
And so using those testing methods, I spent 18 months studying the Bible an hour a day or more. Basically did it between midnight and 2 in the morning in total secrecy. I didn't want my family knowing what I was doing or anyone else. But after 18 months realized, there's a lot in this book I still don't understand, but I've not been able to find a single provable error or contradiction. Where when I
Wow.
looked at the other holy books, I was finding dozens and hundreds, but not a single one.
Wow.
And it was the only holy book I picked up that had predictive power, actually accurately predicting future scientific discoveries and future historical events in human history. And I said the only explanation is this book must be inspired by the one that created the universe. So I was at age 19, at about 1:06 in the morning, one August night, I signed my name in the back of that Gideon Bible, committing my life to Jesus Christ.
That's such an astounding story to me because I'm not a scientist. I don't come from any kind of scientific background. And so often we just hear so many claims about how the Bible is not scientific, how it gets so many things wrong here or there. And then here's someone such as yourself, who essentially you're coming to the conclusions of the cosmological argument as a teenager just by reading physics books and books on cosmology and astronomy, which is so fascinating. Just discovering that if the universe had a beginning, it has to have a beginner, and then going on that quest. So you said you searched through Buddhism and you looked at some other some philosophers. You mentioned that you saw the scientific method in the Bible, and I've heard you even say that that's actually where we get the scientific method. Can you expound on that a little bit? Where did you see that, and how did that really apply to your journey of discovering faith?
Well, I saw it right on the very first page. I mean, it pops right out of Genesis chapter 1. Step one of the scientific method: do not interpret until you establish the frame of reference or the point of view. Step two: do not interpret until you establish the starting conditions. And what you see in Genesis 1:2, before you get into the 6 days of creation, the Spirit of God is hovering over the surface of the waters of planet Earth. That gives you the frame of reference from which to interpret the 6 days of creation. Then it gives you four starting conditions. Water covers the whole surface of the earth. It's dark over the whole surface of the waters, and the earth is empty of life and unfit for life. And then step three of that biblical or that scientific method is simply look at what happens in the experiments or the observations and note what happens when, where, and in what order. And you see that in the description of the 6 days. And then step four, establish the final conditions and note how they're different from the starting conditions. Step five, now that you've done those first four steps, you can come up with a tentative interpretation of what you think you're seeing. Then you want to test that tentative interpretation with other experiments, observations, or in the case of the Bible, other creation relevant biblical texts. That's something else that struck me when I compared the Bible with other holy books. The other holy books might have one, two accounts of creation. What you see in the Bible is over 24 lengthy texts that deal with the subject of creation. And what struck me is when I read on in the Bible, I found that Psalm 104, Proverbs 8, and Job 37, 38, and 39 also take the reader through the content of the 6 creation days. They're not presented chronologically, but the content is there. And that gave me an opportunity to fine tune my interpretation of Genesis 1. I mean, to give you an example, it shows you in Job 38 why it's dark on the surface of the waters, because it says God had blanketed the seas with clouds that kept the seas dark. So there you got an explicit statement. The reason why it was dark on the surface of the waters was not because there was no sun, moon, and stars. It's because the earthy atmosphere of the earth would not let visible light through. Now, I must admit, as a 17-year-old, I had an advantage. From my background in astronomy, I knew that the primordial earth had an atmosphere 200 times thicker than it has today. And an atmosphere that thick will not let any visible light through.
Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched a line upon it? Or where were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out from the womb? When I made clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed limits for it, and set bars and doors, and said, thus far shall you come, and no farther, and here shall your proud waves be stayed. In this 27th atheist convert to Christianity video in our converts series featured in a playlist on my channel. Here's some fascinating words from astrophysicist and former atheist Hugh Ross. Now, there is an hour interview linked in the description. Highly recommend checking that out. along with the 26 other atheists convert to Christianity videos in this series, there is indeed a spiritual awakening, a Christian revival is happening throughout the West. Christ is King. Every knee will bow. Absolutely.